All right. Hey, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Wednesday, September 4th, and we are continuing to track Dorian as it now is on its way up the East Coast, passing by Northeast Florida today, pounding the immediate coastline with some pretty strong tropical storm force winds and rain, and will continue to do so for the next several hours. And then this thing will be moving up through southeast Georgia, trying to bend back and trying to escape off the coast. But it appears to be that it's either going to directly landfall somewhere in either northern South Carolina or somewhere in North Carolina, or maybe just scrape the coast. But overall, the impact will be about the same. That Dorian will bring significant tropical storm to hurricane force impacts to many folks along the coastline of the Carolinas going into tomorrow and early Friday. So let's get right to it. Let's talk about the Northeast Florida area this morning, guys. A little bit of zoom in here as we look at the radar and satellite overlay. And generally speaking, sometime this morning, we've had about what we were expecting. The heavier stuff for Dorian right now is continuing to stay offshore. Most of the bands we've had this morning have mostly been like that one and the one that came through earlier and this one right here, but they're kind of pushing in and dying off a little bit. There's some drier air out this way, so they're not getting very far. They pretty much kind of come in and then they just sort of die out. That's why we were saying the inland counties wouldn't get nearly as much from this as the coastal counties are, but the coastal counties have been taking a pretty good hit this morning. We've mostly had wind gusts sustained, or we've had winds sustained around 35, 40 miles an hour along the beaches with those wind gusts, upwards of 55 in one or two places. We've seen Palm Coast and St. Augustine have both reported wind gusts above 55 miles an hour. And even in Mayport in Jacksonville, we had a wind gust almost to 50 miles an hour earlier this morning when this first big band came through. So definitely been okay of a morning, but overall it's not been too bad. Even around the I-95 corridor where I live, it really hasn't been all that bad. But we do have this lobe here on Dorian. Some of the heavier rainfall is trying to push in this way. Most of the high resolution models do indicate that this lobe will rotate through the area over the next several hours. So I think as we go into the later morning, maybe around 10, 11 o'clock to early after lunchtime, I think that some of these winds and rain will make it on shore. And this area is much stronger than what we've seen this morning with these little outer bands. So if this lobe does manage to get on shore, it will get spicier. But it kind of depends exactly on the final track because it appears Dorian's trying to also wobble a bit more north than northwest. Like you generally have seen this track going to go kind of like this. So it also depends how close the storm gets, but it's very likely that this heavier core of wind and rain does get on shore later today. So definitely, if you're in the Northeast Florida area, don't let your guard down yet this morning because the storm is going to get worse before it gets better as this large core and large eye begin to work up the coast and then eventually turn and try to make it offshore, but probably won't be able to miss completely in North and South Carolina. So that's kind of the biggest thing I got this morning for Northeast Florida. Just keep tracking on the forecast. Nothing looks crazy, nothing looks different, but it likely to pick up before it gets better here today. Looking at some of the observations again, like we talked about, generally in the 20 and 30 knot range as far as sustained winds along the coast, and then gusting upwards of 30, 40 knots. So again, those 30-mile-an-hour winds gusting upwards of 50 is kind of what we've seen, but this radar shows it too. With this area starts moving on, if it does manage to get on shore, it'll definitely pick up. So, looking at Hurricane Dorian's track from the National Hurricane Center at 5 a.m. Again, the storm's still a Category 2 hurricane with 105 mile an hour sustained winds. And the new Hurricane Center forecast track drags this almost directly along the coastline of North and South Carolina. Now, if you heard me in these videos a couple days ago, I was talking about the potential for Dorian for Northeast Florida, and I was saying that the micromanage was a really big deal. And although it's still a concern exactly where this thing tracked, if it's a little further on or offshore, the fact that Dorian is spread out now and this eye is so wide and large, it matters less now exactly how close it gets. If it were to actually scrape the coast or stay 15 miles offshore, it's a really big storm. And as you can see with the radar imagery, I mean, if I put the difference in getting hit by this and getting hit by this and getting hit by this is kind of more or less the same thing at this point. Is this storm is really kind of flattened out in the energy, and we see these bigger storms like Dorian with these bigger eyes indicating that they're much more stable. So they don't weaken or strengthen nearly as fast as they do when they're first forming, where they can become like hyper intense like Dorian did. But then you saw as soon as Dorian had an unfavorable environment, it really dropped off of that energy. Now it's kind of become a much more stable thing. So even though it's going over these warm Gulf Shore or Gulf Stream waters, it's not looking to intensify very much, but it's also not really going to come down very fast either. So we do expect this thing to still be a Category 1 to 2 hurricane as it passes by the North Carolina coast and even will be offshore of the New England area going into Saturday as it begins to race off, and you see in this last two stamps here to the north and away from the area. So these little micromanages, like on the models here, not looking too big of a difference. Now, looking at the current threats of Dorian as far as it does at making up the coast and the timing, let's start with the timing because that's kind of important. So we can see on the model here, I got it set for North and South Carolina, and you can see those heavier rain bands begin to spread into South Carolina right around 01Z on Thursday, which is late tonight. We can see those earlier effects coming on shore. Those tropical storm force winds will already have begun in southeast Georgia, where tropical storm conditions are expected along the coast. But kind of like everybody else, if you're at the coast, you're kind of taking a beating. If you're inland, you're probably going to be okay. That is not the story for South and North Carolina, however. The inland counties one or two removed from the coast will still be getting a strong tropical storm because Dorian will be much closer to you than it will be to Florida and Georgia. So don't think that narrative applies to you too. As you'll see here, Dorian's kind of turning up the coast. You can see that rain begin to really spread into South Carolina with those heavier bands now really starting to work on shore. And this is going to be going into early Thursday morning. This is right around sunrise tomorrow or so, maybe an hour or two after. But you can see that core of the storm moving up now. And although the eye probably won't be quite that defined, it generally gives you an idea that those core winds where you're seeing those hurricane force gusts to sustained hurricane force winds will be coming up. That's why this whole area is under a hurricane watch or warning and likely will still be throughout the day today. I imagine the hurricane warnings will go up pretty soon for the rest of the Outer Banks. I don't think they're up yet, but they're going to be soon. And then you can see here going into later in the afternoon on Thursday, you see the core has really moved up. And anywhere from about Charleston or so northward is where we could see potential direct landfall. And if not, that core is so big, even if it's 20, 30 miles offshore, you may be taking what is left of the core, the what would be the eye wall, quote unquote, of the storm. So I wouldn't get too caught up at this point in the exact track. I think that no matter exactly how close this comes, the effects will be pretty similar. So going into midday on Thursday again, South Carolina, and then those tropical storm winds really begin to spread into North Carolina going into later on Thursday night or afternoon and evening. And then by Friday morning, the storm is picking up speed as it approaches your area, but really pushing. Look at the heavy rains that are pushing into North Carolina, about 7Z. So this is after midnight on Friday going into Friday morning sunrise. You're looking at a lot of heavy rain pushing in, and the coastline will definitely be at least seeing hurricane force gusts, if not some winds sustained in that upper 60 to 70 mile an hour range. So those wind speeds will really start to become a concern at the coastline here. And then the storm races off, and then by about 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, conditions should be starting to improve pretty quickly. And also watch this in the Virginia and Maryland area. You'll get some heavy rains as this passes as well. So it could actually be a whole coastal event for the New England area. I'm going to look into that more this afternoon, hopefully, and see what that means for y'all. But this thing is going to be, kind of pound the whole coast as it does race off to the north. So that kind of gives you your timing, going into later tonight to early tomorrow morning for South Carolina. Northern South Carolina gets it tomorrow evening, and then also late tomorrow evening is when North Carolina can see their conditions go downhill, with the worst being late Thursday night into Friday morning across the North Carolina region. As far as what to expect in terms of rain and wind, well, generally the precipitation is going to be heavy through South and North Carolina. You're talking about the event here being anywhere from 4 to 10 inches, and it will increase as you get to the coast. The inland counties maybe about 4 to 6 inches, but along the coast here, we're expecting 10 inches and locally could see more than a foot of rain. It'll be much more of a prolific rainfall event than it was for Florida, who you think has much more removed from the core of those winds and rain. Where you put them up here or here, you start getting those real heavy rain bands that can produce some torrential rainfall. Now, the rainfall won't be like Florence levels where it's just massive amounts of rain over days and days. It will fall quick, what does fall. So definitely look out for that. And as far as wind gusts are concerned, like I said, well into tropical storm force in the inland counties. And then the coastline, it's, we'll have to kind of see how it plays out. But I would say you're at least in for some hurricane force gusts anywhere from, I'd say, Charleston northward could see hurricane force, so 75 miles an hour gusts. And then those winds will be getting close to 60, 70 miles an hour sustained. I'm not sure if you'll actually get Category 1 sustained hurricane winds, but you'll be pretty freaking close, especially at the coastline. And whatever Dorian has left to offer, you guys are going to get it along the coastal counties. So be ready for some really significant impacts, not for a long period of time, but at least for several hours as Dorian does move by your area. I would definitely forecast that to be an issue. So right now, the the gridded forecast tell you, wind gusts around 71 miles an hour and maybe 80. I would say probably 85 to 90 would be the upper echelon for gusts, and the sustained winds will be right around that upper tropical storm force to possibly right about hurricane force, especially like on these little points and like real outer islands and stuff. Could definitely be seeing those winds very close to that at the beaches. So the last thing I want to talk about today, guys, was the rest of the tropics. We do have a lot more things to talk about. We had Tropical Storm Ferdinand that formed yesterday. This will move into Mexico and not be an issue. Of course, Dorian is going to make its way off the coast. The same trough will catch this system, whether it develops or not, as it moves over Bermuda right now. It could develop, could not. We also have Tropical Storm Gabrielle that formed last night, but it will also move up and away. So none of these storms up here are of concern. They're all moving away from the United States. They're not going to directly impact the United States. Although Gabrielle significant because this does put us significantly ahead of schedule as far as the average season is concerned. We're now looking at Gabrielle being the sixth named storm of the season, which typically doesn't occur until September 16th, and that has occurred on September 4th. So we are now officially in the above average part, or ahead of schedule for the season. So we are in that above average prediction, and we are above average for the season right now. And there are about 2 or 3 African waves that are all going to come off. We have one highlighted by the National Hurricane Center with a 60% chance of development over 5 days. And there's two more that aren't on screen here that are kind of following it. And all of these waves have a good shot of development. We're looking at the chance for some below average wind shear going into mid-September across for the forecast models, and below average wind shear across this region means that these storms are more likely to develop. The less atmospheric winds to tear them apart are, the more chance they have to develop. And on top of that, we also believe that the steering flow will generally take these things towards the Caribbean and keep them kind of low instead of letting them get north and turn away. They'll probably be blocked and be forced southward. So all of these have a chance to develop. We could see several Cape Verde or main development regions sort of hurricanes in a row as they all move towards the Caribbean. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Anytime they get in the Caribbean, they are a direct threat to the United States in some form or another. Not saying any of them are going to actually come here. They could all dissipate, turn out to sea, whatever the case may be. We don't know. But we do know is that the activity should stay above average and could get real busy going into the middle of September. So keep your guard up, keep your eyes on the ball, and let's get through Dorian, and then we'll have plenty of time to track anything else that may spit out of the Atlantic in the future. So, anyway, guys, that's what I got for you this morning. As always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.